Welcome back, everyone. This is Shannon with Cleaning Business Life Podcast, and today I'm actually flying solo. Jamie is busy today, and today we're going to talk about what to do after you fire a client. I thought today we would cover what to do after you fire a client, and relationships, they either grow or they don't grow, right? There's either people that you click with or you don't click with. I had an instance with one of my little's teachers. She and I don't click. I don't get along with people who procrastinate and always have an excuse for one thing or another. I'm just not that individual. So I had to fire the teacher, right? It was a whole thing to go through the assistant principal, the principal. I had to, I felt like I was going to court. It was just really crazy. But it really isn't a failure when you have to fire a client, and there's lots of little red flags, little red herrings that lead up to it, right? You kind of know before you actually acknowledge in your mind. Your gut always tells you your gut is never wrong. So it's typically not drama, but sometimes when you fire a client, it really is drama, and it's like a soap opera, and you're like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that I just had to go through this with you. And it's definitely not something you need to explain on the internet. So this is where a lot of people go wrong. Remember, once it hits the internet, it stays on the internet. It doesn't matter if you delete it or not. Someone has screenshotted it and will use it against you on a later date. So try to remain as professional as you possibly can, and don't air your dirty laundry on the internet. As tempting as it is, because you want to feel justification, you want the dopamine hit, you want a pat on the back because you want to know that what you did was okay. But if you don't want to handle what comes after correctly, it can quietly mess with your confidence, which I've had it happen to do. To me, it can it'll mess up your systems and all of your future decisions, because then you'll lag, right? You won't make that immediate decision right away, and you'll put up with even more BS from the person, just like that person you fired, right? So today we're talking about what actually matters after you fire a client, not the email that fires them, not the wording that fires them, not the confrontation. Hopefully you don't have to have one, but the internal and operational cleanup that determines whether this makes you stronger or hesitant next time you have to fire someone. It's like having a bad date, right? If this is your first time here, I'm Shannon Miller. I work with cleaning business owners who are done guessing about pricing, boundaries, system, and leadership. This episode is for owners who've already made a hard decision. If you didn't want to fire the client, but you knew you had to. If you're feeling and hopefully this will correct it. And if you're feeling anything from relief to guilt to second guessing yourself, that's normal. What's not helpful is pretending that it didn't affect you, and it does. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. No one wants to say, hey, by the way, this just isn't for you. We're not made to, I've told clients to stick it where the sun doesn't shine more since COVID than any other time. But yeah, I've had to do it a couple times. So firing a client is a business decision. It's ultimately what it is. I have fired clients for constantly canceling at the last minute. I've fired clients for yelling at my cleaning techs. I've fired clients for touching my cleaning techs. I've fired clients for being drunk when we shut up or high. And then they say inappropriate things or try to touch. It kind of is a vicious circle, right? I've fired clients because they only wanted to pay cash, and at the time I had crews running all over, and I just couldn't accept cash down in Tucson. It was too hard to facilitate the back end of what that entailed. So we just weren't a good match. So I fired clients for a lot of reasons. So the relief and the doubt do coexist. And when you fire someone, it really is relief. You're like, oh my God, I don't have to deal with that person anymore, right? And then you start to, in the back of your mind, I do this personally. I still do it to this day, is you start to think about, was I too harsh? Did I too mean? How could I handled it well? It's like when you're younger and someone says something to you and you don't have a comeback to say, and you just got caught with your pants down, so to speak, and you're just like, and then later on that night after dinner or before dinner, you're like, I could have totally said that, right? So you start to go through the loop of in your mind. Why women owners especially question themselves. We question ourselves because we have to make multiple decisions throughout our day. We have a lot of people depending on us. We have our family crew, right? We have our neighbor crew. I have a neighbor who's 92 who still lives by herself. So every once in a while we have a little episode, and then I have to call the ambulance, and we're just trying to get her to live in her house as long as possible. Still fully functional, and no, she doesn't still drive. And then we have the customer crew. We have a lot of crews that we're managing, so we often will second guess ourselves because did I make the right decision? Did I not make the right decision? Well, maybe. And then we always overcompensate. We always do It's still to this day. I do it myself, so don't feel guilty if you do it too. And why, when you don't process the breakup, it leads to over accommodating later. So you will, and I'm speaking from experience, you will put up with a lot of shit, and then you go, what is the point, right? So then you'll often hear me talk about in other episodes how someone slipped underneath the door. I'm like, well, where did this person come from? I allowed it, right? It's because it's like when you go on a date, right? Everyone's on their best behavior when you go on your first or second or third or fourth date. It's when you get to the fifth or sixth date that people go, like you doing that. Like we had a house last year. They had 8 cats. She was totally upfront with me about it. I sent the cleaning tech in there. First of all, I can't send anyone who's allergic to cats in a cat house that has 8 cats. I have a couple of homes, and I've probably mentioned this before, that have a lot of cats. Some of the houses, you can't tell they have cats. They maintain the boxes every day. There's not, you would not know they had 9 or 10 cats. You just wouldn't know. But this particular house, it hits you right when you walk in the door. You know that someone is not maintaining the cats. So then it became she had this really interesting engineered wood floor that had this veneer that was rough. So you couldn't mop it with a flat mop. You had to use a rag mop, but then you had to be careful because you couldn't put too much water on it. I mean, and she lived out in the sticks with all the dirt, right? So there was that. And then it was oh, well, I don't want you, and this is someone who's not maintaining their cat boxes. Well, I don't want you dumping the dirty water in the sink. We typically dump them in the sink or the laundry sink if they have one, and we clean the sink at the very end. That's the last thing that's done. And the cleaning tech's like, oh my gosh. So it became this battle. So she just wasn't a good fit. I'm sure she found someone else who can maintain what it was, but the smell, because I went over there one time, was so bad. I was in the home for 5 minutes and my eyes just watered. I felt like I could not, the ammonia was so strong, I could not breathe. And I had to, when I'm telling people stuff, it's not because I want to be mean. It's because I have a duty to act as a business owner. If I don't say, hey, you need to open these windows, it's not good for anyone in the house to be breathing this. They had 8 cats, 7 dogs, a hamster, a ferret, a goldfish, and some other animal. And I'm like, it's great that you have all these animals, but the cats have to be maintained. I go, you can give yourself chemical pneumonia from the ammonia. You got to be really careful. So needless to say, a couple times after that, because I had the conversation, she just let us go, which I was totally fine with because it was very difficult and stressful for the cleaning tech. So once the client is gone, then your decision's done, right? That's what happens 99.999. I have had people in the past who wanted to come back. They went around and they realized that everyone else was higher priced than me, or they went around because everyone wouldn't put up with their shit. And then they wanted to come back. And I'm like, well, I let it happen one time, and then the same stuff just continued. It was the same bad date over and over and over again. I'm like, this isn't going to work. But you said, right? So make sure you don't do what I did. And then there's the danger of explaining yourself to others. You don't have to judge. You are the business owners. You get to pick and choose what customers you get to take on and what customers you don't get to take on. And then avoid story editing after the fact. So don't try to make it fluffy for them. It's just a done deal. Okay, we're not going to be able to do this anymore. I'm really sorry, but see you later, right? As you're around the corner jumping and skipping and doing all the other stuff. So you don't get stronger by boundaries by constantly explaining them. If you have someone who needs it done repeatedly, there's something going on. You don't get stronger by trusting your past self to have made the call with the information that they had. And you don't need a consensus. You just need clarity, consensus. And then this is where, there's 3 questions that you can ask to walk through, right? So what warning signs did I ignore? So with the person who touched the cleaning tech, who is a mere 22 years of age, the mommy bear came out. It was there were signs. You know how it is. You stand there and someone ignores your personal space and they're just like right in your face. And I was just like, dude, And sometimes with males, they can be a little hard of hearing. They're not wearing a hearing aid. I just dismissed it. There were telltale signs. But when he touched her, I was livid. And you can imagine what was said. What system failed or didn't exist yet? I didn't, this is before I had the code of conduct, and that was the result of it. The result of the code of conduct was actually when I got punched by a client, but you can listen to, I can't remember what episode that's in. And then what boundary was crossed before I acted? So you cannot touch your cleaning tech, just like your cleaning tech cannot touch your client. It's just not done, right? And there are clients in the old days when it was just me, I used to give people hugs and give them a smell check to make sure they were bathing, because let's be honest, some of the seniors shouldn't have been living by themselves. No one wants to be the person, that says, hey, so-and-so shouldn't be living by themselves. So I would give them a hug, right? How often do they get a hug? But when it wasn't me anymore, I can't expect the cleaning techs to do that. It wasn't a strategy that could be carried over to someone else, right? And it really is about pattern recognitions, just watching the patterns. And the same things will happen until you correct it over and over and over again. So make sure that your boundaries don't get crossed. And then if the system has failed, you need to fix the system so it doesn't happen again. If there's, stuff that you can do to improve, like, hey, with the lady with the 8 cats, do you have any dogs or kitties in the home that we need to be made aware of? And the reason why I asked that question is because we live in the mountains. And if your Fluffy gets out and gets eaten by the coyotes, I never want to have that conversation, ever. So I always ask, hey, do you have any dogs or cats in your home that we need to be made aware of? And they'll say, well, I have 8 cats. I'm going to be honest with you, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, and I flat out asked, do you maintain the cat boxes? Yeah, I maintain the cat. No, she didn't maintain the cat boxes. Her daughter maintained the cat boxes, but her daughter never maintained those either. So it was just this weird dynamic. Deposits and payment structures. I am preaching from the rafters. Always, 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 when they're brand new to you, first-time clients, even if it's regular maintenance, get a deposit. They don't know the stipulations with you, and you're holding that spot for them on your schedule. So they pay a 50% deposit of the initial quoted price on the day of booking. If they fail to give a deposit, you sell that spot to somebody else. You do not wait. I spoke to someone the other day who did a post-construction, and then they didn't tell them it was post-construction. They didn't know it was post-construction. They didn't get a deposit, and then they're all mad. I'm like, it's subflooring. How are you supposed to mop that? Subflooring is just plywood. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel really bad. Nobody wants to be the person that goes, hey, by the way, blah, blah, blah. And then service scope language, sometimes you have to say the same things, like, how many bedrooms and bathrooms? How many levels is the home? Are you on septic? These are some of the normal questions. We have a couple homes here that are 25,000 square feet. I don't know why anyone would want to live in a house that large, because they usually have 10 bathrooms. Do they rotate Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? So you want to make sure that your scope questions are asked. That what are the other questions? Are you, like for one-time cleanings, are you going to be adding on the inside of your ovens? It's a $95 upcharge. Are you going to be adding on the inside of your refrigerator? Okay, that's great. That's going to be a $95 upcharge. Make sure it's empty upon the arrival of the cleaning tech. So these are all things that I've learned along the way, so you can make sure that you are asking those questions. And then red flag triggers. We had 2 brothers who were living by themselves. There was 3 brothers total. Mom was 97, 98. My mom finally passed away. One brother was with it who lived in the house, and the other brother wasn't. So they constantly bickered, and then they canceled at the last minute. Then it was this, and it was that. And then it was like, I'm like, I can't. On the 3rd try, I'm like, this isn't going to work. I've not billed you once for this. I have people who are depending on these hours, and I go, I can't give it to you. So I'm taking you off the schedule and you get it worked out. So then the 3rd brother called me back and wanted to light my ass on fire because I reneged out of what I was going to do. I'm like, I've given you 3 opportunities to be on my schedule, and you have not been able to produce. The next time, when we put you back on the schedule, I'm taking a 100% deposit. I go, I did it because I felt bad for you. See, emotion, none for me. And I should have billed you each and every time, but I did not. So do not complain to me. So make sure that the staff escalation rules, what to do in a code of conduct situation. When I got punched, there was a whole protocol that came out of that, right? Healthy businesses don't rely on vibes, even though it would be really cool if they did. Hey, man. They rely on systems that quietly prevent chaos, smooth running shifts. Remember, I always say, you want to make smooth running shifts. When I had my other business, people would come working for me and they're like, man, this is the smoothest cleaning company I've ever worked for. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes. Every fired client should improve your operation, not just your spine. I love that one. And then why hesitation creeps in after the conflict. So no one likes to be the person that's shamed. No one likes to be the person that says, hey, you're not liked and we don't want you. You're not worthy. So you start to doubt yourself a little bit. And then there's the danger of swinging too far the other way. I think there's only one time that I went all the way to the edge, and it was because, and I probably have mentioned this in another podcast, that I talk about Rebecca, and Rebecca was just this very mousy individual who was very soft-spoken. And this woman just tried to take advantage of her to get her to do extra things, and then started to yell at her. So when I walked in there to check on the job, she was in tears, and I got mad. I just lost it. And then I had to pull everybody off the job. I ended up losing her neighbor, and her other neighbor, because remember, they all talk. And she just was a really unpleasant individual. Very unpleasant. I won't get into all the nitty gritty. You can find the episode. So there's the danger of swinging too far the other way, which I've done. And then there's re-anchoring in data and value. So as long as when you fire somebody, you learn what mistakes you did to lead up to, letting that person underneath the door, and it doesn't happen again, you're good to go, man. And then when firing a client is a win, sometimes, we've all talked about legacy clients, and there's a lot of anxiety that kind of happens with having legacy clients. And then there's that opportunity where they go and then another person fills that spot and they just, oh my God, the cleaning ladies are here. We love when the cleaning buddies are here, and they tip $20 to each girl each time. If you're working in doubles or solos or whatever it is, they pre-prep, they pick up all their stuff, including the chonies on the floor. They do all of the wonderful things. So you just never know what you're going to get. And then sometimes the team morale will improve, right? If you have someone who's really difficult, who curses at the girls or tries to say things that are inappropriate or has a lot of demands or is really hostile towards you, it's not fun for anybody, and it puts your crew in danger. Your schedule will smooth out, cash flow will stabilize, and mental bandwidth returns. And I think that's probably the most important part. When you have someone who takes up too much bandwidth in your brain, you start to obsess over it, right? And then at dinner, you're obsessing over it when you should be spending time with your husband and your kids or your partner or whoever that is, right? So make sure that someone doesn't take up too much bandwidth in your head. And then you need to pay attention to what gets easier after someone leaves. That's data too, right? Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that this was an issue. This person always canceled notoriously. They sign up for biweekly. Every 2 weeks they cancel. So they end up getting only, 12, 14 visits instead of 26. And then you held the spot for them. It just becomes a whole thing. So that's when you know to automatically adjust them. And I flat out say, hey, I'm really sorry that you're having a hard time with whatever's going on. I'm going to pull you from the schedule. We're going to put you on a monthly or an as-needed on-call basis. Your price is going to adjust. And when this stabilizes and you get through whatever it is, I'm happy to put you back on the schedule. Pretty easy peasy. If this episode hit close to home, this is exactly the kind of work we do inside of Clean Freaks University, especially around boundaries, pricing, and client filtering. Woo-woo! You don't need thicker skin, you need cleaner systems. I'll link the resources below if you want to help tighten this up. Thanks for tuning in.